So I'd like to just wish you all a good Erev Chag. I'm sure many of you have been overwhelmed with preparing for Pesach, in addition to coping with what is this most unusual time. And we're finally at a moment where hopefully we can breathe. I see some of you already in your Yom Tov gear. I also am. Maybe you're just faking it like me, and really everything's still crazy, but we're on camera, so we've got to look nice. But it's wonderful to take this chance just to breathe and inhale and get a sense of the waves of Yom Tov that are about to come over us. There are a couple of practical reminders I'd like to begin with just as a public service. One is just a reminder for Erev Tavshilin. If one hasn't made that yet, this is a great time to go and prepare that. I'd also recommend, if you have the paper or a printer, printing out the Yom Tov instruction sheet that I sent out yesterday evening. It's got all the information, all the timings, all the ritual variations, everything that you could need, with some helpful suggestions for how to pass the time and structure the day, and of course, how to deal with potential health issues over Yom Tov. And as always, my home is 8115 189th Street, and Abe's sitting there. It was Abe's home. And if you need anything at any point over Yom Tov, you should feel free to come by, knock on the door, step back the requisite 6 feet. So we are maintaining social distancing, but we will have a socially distant but spiritually close conversation about how I can help you and whatever you need. I'll be sitting on the porch, weather permitting, at various points, happy to wave and say hello to anybody coming past. It's a wonderful thing to see you all, and I'd love to do that in person too. One technical point. On the sheet it says that Seder should not start before 8:13. The truth is, the first Kiddush, the first cup, shouldn't start before 8:13. If you want to sit down and sing 14 versions of the Simanim, or sit down and introduce the evening, or sit down and read or talk together, you could start that whenever you like, after Marav. It's just the Kiddush that has to start at 8:13, and everyone is welcome to do that. Candlelighting is at 7:09. Now, I will now turn to the drasha in compensation for not being able to be with you in person tomorrow at Shul, to share a small thought about the Seder. Now, this evening's liturgy is peppered with props and gestures. We dip and we lean and we drink and we eat and we sing and we breathe the feelings of freedom, harnessing the tartness of horseradishes or romaine leaves to recollect the pain of lashes and beatings. We imbibe the brackishness of vegetative brine to remind us of the streams of saline tears. We eat matzah to recall the haste of our emancipation and sandwich the symbols of destiny and fate dipped in a hint of the taste of apples and mortar. Some eat eggs. We all sip wine, reminding ourselves to unleash ourselves and feel the blessing of liberty. And of these liturgical quirks, we ask at the start about 4 in particular: the matzah and the maror and the dipping and our inclination. But there are ceremonial eccentricities that we do not query. And the one that I'd like to touch on this afternoon, this era of Yom Tov, is one that immediately precedes our fourfold inquiry of Manishtana. Everybody at the table who has a set of 3 stacked matzot will stand and select the matzah that sits in the middle, slotted between the symbols that are associated with elite priests on the top and correlated with the masses on the bottom. And that middle matzah will be split in 2 in the step of the Seder called Yachad. And what is so astonishing about this is that in Jewish ritual life, brachot, blessings, are reserved for things that are whole. We go to extreme measures to retain the shalem status of our matzot. For those of you who use hand-baked matzah, you will often, I will leave through heaps of wafer-thin cracked sheets in the hopes of finding 3 complete pieces. And generally speaking, if we have the choice between a whole loaf or a slice, we hold the whole and recite the bracha. And the same is true for fruit or candy or any kind of food. So why do we take a stand at the start of the Seder and shatter a commodity as precious as a complete sheet of matzah? What statement are we making? What insinuation are we intimating with our gesture? Why do we begin the night with an act of fracture? And there are four different brief views that I wish to share with you this afternoon, taking us from ancient Israel to the Sea of Reeds, to the realm of theology, and back to the present day. First, we have the 18th century poet and preacher, mystic and teacher, the man known as Reb Aaron the Great, Aaron ben Yaakov Perlov of Karlin. He was a Rebbe among those responsible for the early and rapid spread of Hasidic energy across the plains of Eastern Europe. And he maintained that this performative break of Yachat evokes the first moment of covenantal Jewish history. The moment that a dense prophetic mist descended onto the head of our first patriarch. Having made the journey across the Fertile Crescent and walked away from his family at the bidding of the omnipresent, Abraham's descent into the unknown was cemented by a divine oath that he would have a son, and that that son would father a nation as numerous as the stars of the sky. And to seal that vow, Avram sliced sheep and cows into two pieces and then fell into a deep slumber as the sun set beneath the horizon. And as he slept, his restive mind filled with images of the words that the verses transcribed, with a warning that before the dawn of his progeny's day, they were to serve as slaves to a strange nation and spend centuries praying for freedom. For Rav Aaron the Great, it is this covenant between the parts, this Brit Ben Habatarim, that symbolically resides in the performative preface to the story that we will tell tonight. When we split the matzah in two, we introduce Magid with the truth that this descent into an Egyptian hell was foreseen and somehow necessary, part of the procedure of our nation building. So we endow our history with a mythic quality that our circumstances are part of a plan long ago foretold. And for a second reading, we turn to a collection of medieval analysts and anthologists known as the Tosafists. And they wrote in their comments to the Chumash, called the Da'at Tikenim, that this ritual fissure is intended to resemble a division from the other side of our time in Egypt, not the preface, but the appendix. Because when we break the matzah in two, they say, we evoke the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. For the Tosafists, before we start the story of our exile and exodus, we offer a spoiler. We remind ourselves of how it all ends, and while this may seem like a strange way to extract the dramatic tension from the telling of our story, a 2011 study by Nicholas Christenfeld and Jonathan Levitt of UC San Diego suggests that, in the words of their essay, story spoilers don't spoil stories. In fact, they claim through numerous bodies of research that spoilers actually enhance our enjoyment of a story, because when we know how it ends, we can relax and read in peace, allowing the story that we will read to unfold in the safety that we will not be surprised or disappointed. And the story that we will tell this evening has all the makings of a tragedy. For our ancestors to survive the sand pits and brick pits and the clutches of Egypt, there would need to have been a miracle. So we set the stage in a coded gesture that invites us not to suspend our disbelief, but to invest our reading and telling of the story with the deep belief that we know we will be redeemed. So on the one hand for Rav Aaron the Great, and on the other for the Tosafists, Yachat is a physical preamble to the Magid in which we inaugurate the story with an allusion to how it all began and how it all came to an end. We begin with a sense of destiny, alluding to the two moments of prophetic parentheses that surround our struggle for freedom, and a single rift in the middle matzah girds us for a story like no other. But there is another way to understand our behavior this evening, found in the writings of a man who has come to epitomize unbridled Jewish joy, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And though his disciples see a smile as the only authentic imprint of Jewish life, he himself suffered from bouts of deep depression, something he writes about in his own words. And for him, this ritual division that begins our story, Yachat, does not invest our story with a sense of destiny or certainty or inevitability. Yachatz is a celebration of brokenness and humility. If the matzah, as the mystics see it, is an emblem of faith, our consumption of the matzah is evocative of how we integrate faith or understanding the world or our purpose and the hand of providence into our lives. And we begin the story with a concrete and conspicuous confession that we are broken, that our mortal minds cannot comprehend everything, that our finite reason cannot understand everything, that we are weak and fragile and delicate and brittle like a piece of matzah that splits at the least amount of pressure. But this is not a dirge for Rabbi Nachman or a lamentation. It is a celebration of our fragility in the spirit of the words of Leonard Cohen's anthem. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So now, like the middle matzah, we sit between the readings of the dynasties of Karlin and Breslov, one suggesting that we celebrate inevitability and the other that we embrace uncertainty. So we turn now to another dynasty, to Ger, to the Sfat Emet, for a resolution. For him, the break does confess an imperfection, an absence of wholeness, but for him, what is broken is not lost. Because what happens to the pieces of the yachat? We don't lose them. We don't discard them. They are stored away and resurface at the end of the story. The bread of our faith, the food of our freedom, is an instantiation of hope. And though our hope is often broken, it is never lost. The time will come for its return, for hope is the very lifeblood of Jewish survival and Jewish character. In the words of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope, we say, has never been destroyed. There is a way, a Jewish way of telling the story of our situation, that what happens is not chance, but a chapter in the complex script of the covenant which leads mysteriously but assuredly to our redemption. And as we all in a couple of hours' time break our middle matzah, I imagine that many of us will feel the ripples of that fissure in our bones and in our souls, because if we had any doubt, the last 4 weeks have taught us the extent of our fragility, our predictive illiteracy, and our essential brokenness. But then, as we store away those broken pieces and retell the extraordinary story of how freedom and healing came to a mass of reeling slaves, let us allow that certainty to slowly resurface, recast by the flames of faith and patience and hope. And then as we pick up those pieces, having sung the first half of Hallel and seen the end of the story, let us pray that our brokenness begins to heal and our lives begin to feel more free, that we resurface together, redoubled in our convictions to fulfill our most central mission, to bring us, our community, our nation, and the world closer together. I want to wish you all a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. I will allow you to unmute yourselves so that you can all say hello to each other and wish each other a good Yom Tov.
Free.
Yeah, it's a math, everyone.
Everybody.
Say so.
Summers and Abe. And who else do I see? I see the Laubers and the Browns and the Tipners. And I see the Bruckners. And I see
Chag Kasher
and Sharon.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Reichwald and the Appels. And I see and Leo and Avram. And the Iskwitzes and the Bermans, the Rosenblums and the Razors, the Scribers, and the Ulas and the Ravens, and the Rosenbaums and the Grosses. What else do I see? I see
I feel like we're on
and the Nissenfelds, and I see Jerry and Debbie and the other Iskwitzes and the Billas.
Chag Kasher
And I see a
B'Sameach.
number of people. The Herskwitzes, Chag
Chag
Sameach
Kasher
to
B'Sameach,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a
Your name
wonderful
has been
Yom
called,
Tov.
you can then believe.
As well, and to Miriam.
Thank you so much. Good Yom Tov, everybody. I look
Karen?
forward if you go waving to you from the
Well, hold
board.
on.
Good Yom Tov, good Yom Tov, good Yom Tov.
Chag Sameach.
Good Yom Tov.
Thank you.